Hello again everybody and welcome back to the channel. Make sure you hit like and subscribe down below. Today we're back in the Heavy Division's Boeing 787-10 Dreamliner for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and for those of you who still aren't aware of what it is, for those of you with Premium Deluxe and you've got the Asobo 787, this mod is a freeware project and it vastly improves how the Dreamliner works. So really good, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'm going to show you guys some of the latest features, including VNAV descent. So then, almost at the whole point for runway 23 right here at Manchester Airport, and the scenery behind us is by Macco Simulations, a really great new developer for the sim. And if you've not yet got his products, Manchester and Birmingham, they are very good, so I can highly recommend it. And some of you might be thinking, why are you going on about VNAV today? There's been a couple of new things put into the Heavy Division Dreamliner mod, which we can enjoy. One of them is the progress page, so we can see down here, I'll show you guys in the cruise, our distance to go for a number of different waypoints coming up on our route. So that is a really handy tool in working out top of descent and a few other things. But VNAV is also quite useful because in lieu of any VATSIM ATC telling us to descend to specific flight levels, we might, for example in America, get descend with the star. And if we get that, and there are loads of altitude constraints through the star, then instead of us actively managing that ourselves and constantly checking the charts and worrying, it's easier for us to just use VNAV and let the aeroplane calculate that descent itself. As always, some tips with this to bear in mind. If you're going to fly through icing, turn your wing and anti-ice onto at least auto for takeoff. And if you've not checked out my other tutorials for the Heavy Division 787 mod, then I really recommend checking those out so you guys can see all of the features and get to know the aeroplane really well, so you can enjoy it more. Today we're going to be doing a very short hop from Manchester, where we're departing now in a bit of a crosswind, to London Heathrow, and we're going to be flying the Honolly 1 Hotel arrival into Heathrow, expecting the ILS runway 27 right. We can select the Honolly 1 Hotel on our arrival, and we can see Honolly on the top left of your screen, 113.65, and there's a hold there as well. And this aeroplane is capable of automated holds now, so we could make use of that if we had to. It was a busy VATSIM event, for example, and we were told to hold at Honolly, we could enter that automatically, and I've done a tutorial on how to use that. We enter the 113.65 and then TOBID, and then we can see SOPIT has got a constraint of flight level 150, and it's not just the line below saying at or above, and it's not the line above saying at or below flight level 150. Because the flight level for 150 is sort of sandwiched between the two lines, that is telling us that we have to be exactly at 150 as we pass SOPIT. And then after that we've got a speed constraint of 220 knots with the Westcott NDB, and I'll show you guys how to use that with the VNAV, because at that point we're also then going to be continuing descent down to another constraint of flight level 70 at Bovingdon. So this is a really good route to show you guys how to use these features. So I hope you do find it useful. If you do, please do click like and subscribe down below as well. And of course, any questions you can always find me on Discord, whether it be the Heavy Division Discord server or my own. Heading out of Bovingdon then, I'm going to be configuring for the ILS runway 27 right, and we're pretty much going to be flying in over North London, vectoring around for the ILS over the Thames, and then coming into land. So we've got a few things to tune and talk about on our way in. So, first thing that we are looking to prep is our arrival, and I've selected the Honolulu 1 Hotel arrival with the transition over Bovingdon for ILS 27 right. At this point you must check your NAVRAD page and make sure that your ILS frequency matches what you're expecting as per the charts. Sometimes the sim won't have it in there, so it's important that we check that ourselves. There's our progress page, so we can see that we've got 1 mile to Samba, and we're passing that now, we've just passed that, and it's updated saying that we've got 10 miles to Yatuxa, 54 nautical miles to Honolulu. And if we look at the bottom of the MFD there, because we've enabled the VOR tracking function, we've got 52 miles to go there. So all good. Head to your init ref and go to your approach tab and select what flap setting you're going to be flying the arrival in and what flap setting you want for landing. And with the long runway at Heathrow and knowing some of the exits, I'm going to select flaps 25, and there's our VREF of 153. So we click there and we add it into that flap speed setting there. So in legs, make sure you clear any discontinuities, we don't like those. We've got a double Bovingdon there as well, for example, so there's another little example of clearing your flight plan and checking that. So that's all done and clear. And you can see that at SOPIT we have a constraint of 15,000 feet. Nothing at Westcott. Speed constraints aren't yet able to be manually entered. However, if we wanted to add a constraint at Westcott of say 11,000 feet, we can add that in like so. If we want to delete it, we can delete it like so. And there's at Bovingdon 7,000 as well. So you can see that those two constraints that we've just discussed. We've got the Honolulu VOR tuned 113.65, and we've got the Bovingdon VOR tuned of 113.75. We've got the Chiltern NDB tuned into ADF right in case of a go around, and we've got ADF left tuned into Westcott 335. So sort your range out, make sure your range is friendly, and you can see that we're at our cruise altitude already. So what else can we plan? Now if we look at the charts again, we can see that at SOPIT and Westcott the distance between the two is 8.3 nautical miles. And if we're coming in at flight level 150 and we're doing 280 knots for example at that point, as the VNAV might tell us to in the descent bit of the FMS, we're going to bust past that and we're not going to be able to slow the aeroplane down enough to reach that speed constraint of 220 knots which is published on the charts, and similarly at Bovingdon as well there. So that could cause us some issues. What I'm going to plan for is just prior to our stop of descent, we're going to slow down and we're going to start to decelerate the aeroplane. Especially the Dreamliner, it's quite slippery, very aerodynamic, and it's actually quite difficult to slow her down and get her to descend quite nicely. And I'll show you guys how to do that. One thing to also check now is our top of descent marker, and we can see that little green ring there with our top of descent, and that is where the aeroplane is telling us that we should start to descend to meet all of our altitude constraints as we go. That logic has been updated recently, so actually it's quite accurate now and we can enjoy it and rely on that almost. So that's a really good way of knowing when we need to descend. Because we're going to get there quite quickly, what I'm going to discuss is our setup for that now. And our altitude constraint before, you guys will know that I love to descend using vertical speed because I can choose when I descend and I can choose the rate of that descent quite nicely there. So I favour vertical speed, but for VNAV all you've got to do is we want to be at flight level 150 by SOPIT, 7,000 by Bovingdon. Let's set for example 5,000. All we've got to do is set 5,000 on that altitude select. You can see it selected on the PFD there as well, and we're confirmed in VNAV path, LNAV VNAV path. And speed wise, for managing the auto throttle, you're going to see a couple of different things. So as we reach top of descent, the aeroplane is going to start to put the nose down. Auto throttle is going to disappear, that light there. It's going to be in VNAV speed mode, and the aeroplane is going to idle the throttle for that descent. If we want to take over from that, which is quite likely, all we've got to do is push in the centre here. So we have control of that speed, and then we can click it again if we are happy for it to go back to automated. But we can select that speed and we can manage that however we wish. If you're not sure how to get the VORs to show up here, as you can see you've got a couple of different needles there for Bovingdon and Honolulu. Click menu on your MFD and tick VOR left and right. Providing they're tuned and in range, they will appear and give you guys data. If you want to check your altitude constraints inside the MFD, again in the menu, just press data and you can see flight level 150, and you can see it working out what altitudes we need to be at certain waypoints. That can be quite busy, as you guys just saw, so I favour just checking the constraints in the FMS. Another top tip, as you're slowing down and you're starting to enter this arrival procedure, some of the turns can be quite tight. Loads of you guys love to have that heading bank limiter onto auto. At that point, if you're slowing the aeroplane down, there's no reason why you can't switch that collar all the way to 30 degrees, and that'll allow the aeroplane to make tighter turns, because I know that's been an issue for some people recently. So there's a little tip there for you guys. And again, if we check our progress page, you can see we've got 3 miles to Honolulu, 14 miles to Tobit, and 103 nautical miles, track miles to Heathrow, with an estimated time of arrival of 0953 Zulu, and our fuel on board estimations as well. So the progress page is fantastic, and it's a really vital bit of kit actually. As I've covered before, if you want to enter holds, we could go into hold there and we can select what waypoint we need to hold at if ATC tell us, and I've done a tutorial on that, so do check that out guys. And we make sure that we always recenter the heading bug. Don't forget to turn your flight director on before departure. I know I missed that in my haste to get airborne and get the tutorial started. So as long as you select your altitude that you want to go to eventually before you reach that top of descent marker, you're going to be golden. You can see there we're closing in on that quite quickly. If one thing to bear in mind, if ATC tell us to descend further and therefore ignore the constraint within the star, what we would need to do is go into vertical speed mode at that point and manage the descent ourselves like we would normally, like I would quite regularly in my streams. So let's punch that to give you guys an example of the speed control with VNAV. So we're waking that up and we're taking over and asking the auto throttle to do what we're asking it to do for speeds. And we're going to start to slow the aeroplane down ever so slightly prior to our start descent. So everything's prepped, we've got VNAV on, we've selected a lower altitude in our altitude selection part of the FCP, and we're just waiting to reach that top of descent marker. We've tuned our ADF so we can see those flashing ever so slightly on the little nav screen below the PFD there, little blue arrow flashing. "12 miles to SOPIT." And what we should achieve here is flight level 150 at SOPIT, and as we pass SOPIT we should then continue a descent further to reach exactly flight level 70 at Bovingdon. So there's two different constraints that we have to reach here, and I think this is quite a good test for the aeroplane. And it's also a good example of showing you guys how this system works. Again, if we wanted to give the auto throttle back to the aeroplane to choose its own speeds, we can just click that, and you can see on the PFD we've allowed it to accelerate. If you do what I've done here, you can see that we confused the aeroplane basically, and we've given it too much to do. And in VNAV, it won't go nose down until it's at the speed that it's got on the speed tape there, that target. So you'll see now it's starting to meet 270. We can't quite reach that. We could use some speed brakes because we're going to bust that altitude target, and it just helps the aeroplane descend quite rapidly. And it's quite significantly, quite strong actually with this. So if you're using speed brake as a last resort, use it very sparingly. So Westcott's next. Max speed of 220. Let's set 215. Keep an eye on your speed tape. If you pass that up marker, then you need flaps 1. Similarly, we're going to pass the 1 marker, so we're going to need flaps 1 as well. And down we go. If you're going to decelerate, it's important that you decelerate before you reach that top of descent marker, because otherwise you're going to have exactly what just happened to me there at that first waypoint. And if that happens to you, like I've demonstrated, just use speed brake to try and help get everything back on track. But it can become quite busy if things start to go a bit wonky. Flaps 5 is a good one. As you can see there, it's actually resulted in an increase of drag on the airframe. So the aeroplane is allowing itself to descend a lot steeper in VNAV path for this next stage. So there's another little handy tip there, if you like. QNH1009. We can arm our speed brake, and we can prep for our arrival. So we're going to go with auto brakes 1 into Heathrow. Remember, we've already set a flaps 25 arrival and other bits within our arrival page of the FMS as well. Manage the range so you can see what's going on, and you're going to see now what's going to happen when we reach 7,000 just before Bovingdon. The aeroplane should pitch up and meet that 7,000 target. So I've tried to show you guys the best of both worlds here, what to do if it starts to go a bit wrong, and for the second target, both exact constraints, showing you guys how the aeroplane behaves just prior to reaching that as well. So 7 miles to go, and you can see now that it's starting to pitch the nose up to slow that rate of descent down. so that we tickle Bovingdon at 7,000. It's a really good feature, love it. Five miles to go, 200 above. I can then wake it up and say actually I want 3,000, and even then the aeroplane's not doing anything, look, because it's saying we need to respect that 7,000 altitude constraint at Bovingdon. 4.6 miles, less than 100 foot to go now, and that's a perfect example of how this VNAV descent path works. If we want to continue descent further down, vertical speed mode, and down we go. So I'm off to manage the descent into London Heathrow and fly this ILS approach. Make sure you check out the video description down below if you want the latest experimental branch links, which include the progress page, the VNAV implementation, and all these other cool stuff inside the mod. Head to the Heavy Division Discord server as well, the link to that will be in the description as well, and make sure you say thanks to that fantastic developer Comey that's behind the scenes working away, improving the 787-10 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Check out my live stream schedules, come say hi when I'm live next in the chat, and be sure, if you haven't done so already, to check out my Heavy Division 787 Dreamliner mod tutorials, so you guys can make the most out of what is a fantastic freeware improvement project for the Dreamliner. In the meantime though, as always, thanks everybody for watching.